optimism, proving the perfect antidote to the horrible realities of modern international terrorism, apparently. Indeed, it was as a result of her writing to the producers to tell them how much she had enjoyed the show that she wound up starring in the godforsaken film adaptation, which has gone on to become the most successful British-backed movie ever. Now, only a certifiable maniac could claim that the film of Mamma Mia is actually any good. It isn't. It's knee-tremblingly terrible in every conceivable respect. The plot, if one may call it such, goes like this. A former Chiquitita-turned-aging dancing queen faces her Waterloo when her Nina Pretty Ballerina daughter discovers that her Mamma Mia doesn't know which man after midnight gave her a child. After sending out an SOS to her honey, the angel-eyed kid decides to take a chance on 3 potential suitors to prove their possible parentage, with the winner taking it all up the aisle at her impending nuptials. Voulez-vous? Not half pop pickers. If you think the plot sounds ropey, try getting your head around a cast which pairs up stalwart Scandinavian thespian Stellan Skarsgård, in a role reportedly turned down by Bill Nighy, with rumbustious British treasure Julie Walters, who, according to legend, triumphed over an equally well-known comedian who was told at the auditions that the role was hers unless she sang like a cow in labour, which it seems she did. Oddly, the bovine procreation rule doesn't appear to have been extended to Pierce Brosnan, who is, without doubt, the worst singer ever heard in a motion picture ever. And I'm including in that hallowed list Charles No-Neck Gray in the Rocky Horror Picture Show and Peter Boyle's monster-clumping massacre of Puttin' on the Ritz from Young Frankenstein. Is that the QE2 docking, or Pierce Any Key Will Do Brosnan searching for a middle C? The moment in Mamma Mia when I realised that Pierce was actually going to take a running jump at SOS sent me quite literally, as opposed to metaphorically, into the head between the knees, thank you for flying air atonal brace position. So when you're near me, screeched Pierce at the top of his paint-peeling voice, darling, can you hear me? SOS! Duck and cover, run for the hills, hide under the tables and keep your face away from the screen for fear that your ears will be melted off by the buttock-clenching squonkfest that is Brosnan singing. Screw nuclear weapons. If North Korea or Iran ever start to get antsy again, we could just drop Pierce behind enemy lines to sing a few bars of I Have a Dream, and surrender would surely follow apace. Also, he could prove a useful deterrent against global warming because the temperature in the screening room I was in dropped about 1,000,000 degrees the minute Brosnan took a deep breath and let fly. The iceberg lettuce in my sandwiches stayed crunchy fresh for a week. While Pierce was taking it upon himself to redefine the parameters of the popularly accepted rules of musical engagement, Muriel, Her Majesty Mrs. Strepsil, was going at the works of Benny and Bjorn as if they were the outpourings of the bard himself. Her interpretation of The Winner Takes It All owed more to the murder scene from Macbeth than to the pure pop traditions of Eurovision. When Muriel said or sang that I don't want to talk, you understood that she really did not want to talk at all, ever, ever. Agog, I waited for her Shakespearean take on ABBA's worst Scando-English lyric, a big thing or a small, and was not disappointed. By the time the song was finished, the palms of my hands were bleeding, my uncut nails having dug into them in a fever of pseudo-stigmatic ecstasy. To be clear, the film is awful. And yet, somehow, in the middle of all that awfulness, something wonderful happened. As the tidal wave of poop crashed over my head, the world seemed to perform a peculiar axis-altering tilt whereby north became south, black became white, pleasure became pain, and against all the odds, good became bad, and vice versa. Even as every critical faculty I possessed told me to run screaming from the theatre right now, I felt my heart swelling, my eyes welling up, my pulse starting to jump, and my general aura going all pink and cuddly. I presume this is what it's like taking heroin. Really bad, but in a way which is strangely appealing at the time. I say I presume because all that I know about heroin is what I learned from Lou Reed and Trainspotting, namely that the soundtrack is nice, but you end up screaming in a pool of vomit while swivel-headed dead babies march across the ceiling, or chasing cack-encrusted suppositories round the U-bend of an Edinburgh public toilet, neither of which sound great. But Mamma Mia, for all its hideous flaws, had miraculously started to sound absolutely brilliant. It's a fitting testament to the power of Benny and Bjorn's songwriting that their work appears to be unassailable, even when James Bond himself has been licensed to kill their songs. When you do this sort of thing to the Beatles' back catalogue, you wind up with William Shatner gaily massacring Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, leaving Lennon and McCartney looking every bit as stupid as Captain Kirk. But the ABBA songbook is made of sterner stuff, and no amount of inappropriate celebrity honking can dispel the magic of those pure pop classics. By the time La Strepsil started rhapsodising that her daughter was slipping through my fingers, I was in floods of tears. Tears of laughter, tears of joy, tears of, let's be honest, shame, but tears nonetheless. And as I looked around the darkened auditorium at my fellow cowering critics, I realised that I was not alone, although several of my wet-faced comrades would thrice deny their uncontrollable physical responses as the cockerel's crow heralded the arrival of their crucifying reviews in the morning papers. Don't get me wrong, Mamma Mia is rubbish, but rubbish the likes of which we shall not see again for some time, and rubbish which somehow left in its wake a trail of resplendent joy and bonhomie which would have satisfied Morecambe and Wise's oft-sung request that we bring them fun, sunshine and love, and leave Ken Dodd thanking the Lord that he'd been blessed with more than his share of happiness. Mamma Mia went on to become the fastest-selling DVD ever in the UK, although I remain convinced that in order to appreciate it fully, you had to see it with an audience. We were on holiday in Cornwall when Mamma Mia came out, so Linda and our daughter went to see it at the fabulous Screen 7 of the Regal Cinema in Redruth, tagline, Stairway to 7, and had a ball. Meanwhile, I endured Transformers with our son, who enjoyed the robots hitting each other, but couldn't understand what useful role was served by Megan Fox. I tried to explain to him that the film was directed by Michael Bay, who is, in his father's twisted opinion, the Antichrist and enemy of cinema, but he still wanted to own it on DVD the day it came out. Hey-ho. Back to Southampton Street and Time Out and Piranha Women in the Avocado Jungle of Death. In case you don't know, there's little reason why you would, Piranha Women in the Avocado Jungle of Death was actually a UK retitling of an American movie called Cannibal Women in the Avocado Jungle of Death. The film had undergone its subtle name change in order to circumvent the peculiar prejudices of the British Board of Film Classification, who, in the mid-80s, had acquired the state-legislated power to rate, cut and ban all videos released in the UK. Unfortunately, during the pre-regulated video nasty scare, a number of titles including the word cannibal had been seized by the police and prosecuted under the Obscene Publications Act, titles such as Cannibal Holocaust, Cannibal Ferox, Cannibal Apocalypse, and the immortal Prisoner of the Cannibal God, which starred bona fide screen legend Ursula Andress. Under the iron rule of the ever-vigilant James Furman, the BBFC had been given instructions to look very carefully at anything which invoked the spectre of the video nasty, and apparently this jumpiness extended to any movie, no matter how innocuous, which sounded even vaguely disreputable, particularly if their titles contained a tabloid-baiting buzzword like cannibal. Thus, Colourbox, an independent company who had picked up the rights to Cannibal Women, cannily changed the title to Piranha Women in order to ease the video's progress through the censor's offices. The other word that our censors got a bee in their bonnet about was chainsaw, thanks to the notoriety of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and its variously banned sequels. This led to one of the maddest pieces of video retitling, again by Colourbox, for Fred Olen Ray's harmless splatter spoof Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers, which had the actual word chainsaw taken out of its title and then replaced by a small outline drawing of, you guessed it, a chainsaw. Thus, although the cover art featured a small silhouette of a chainsaw and a gaudy picture of Scream Queen Michelle Bauer in underwear and heels brandishing a bloody huge chainsaw, technically the word chainsaw never actually appeared anywhere, so the video didn't get banned. Stupider still, the film was now officially called Hollywood Hookers, which made it sound like a porn flick, although I'd love to see someone attempting to relax in a gentleman's way to a film in which anything that comes up comes off, if you see what I mean. As for Piranha Women, the actual content of the film, sex, nudity, violence, flesh-eating, etc., was solidly tame. In fact, the movie had very little to delight either the gorehounds or the hand shandy brigade, despite leading lady Shannon Tweed's centrefold status. What it did have was a really decent screenplay by writer-director J.D. Athens, who later turned out to be J.F. Lawton under a pseudonym. Lawton would go on to write a darkly interesting script entitled 3000, about a rich man who hires a prostitute to pretend to be his girlfriend for the titular fistful of dollars. The premise smacked of Pygmalion and therefore of My Fair Lady, although Lawton's story ended with the hooker going back to her downbeat street life rather than joining the rich man in his vacuously extravagant champagne lifestyle. After various rewrites which effectively removed all the unpalatable rough edges, 3000 finally made it to the screen as Pretty Woman, one of the biggest money-spinning blockbusters of the decade. Lawton would subsequently pick up writing credits on movies starring everyone from Steven Seagal, Keanu Reeves and Morgan Freeman to Martin Landau and Robert De Niro. But that was all in the future. Back in the late 80s, he was just another goofy, pseudonymous B-movie chancer, with nothing to distinguish him from the terrible Troma pack, other than the fact that his movie was actually pretty good. The story of Piranha Women goes like this. Following a Vietnam-style military debacle, ethno-historian Dr. Margot Hunt is sent by the CIA into the avocado jungle in search of eminent renegade feminist Dr. Irma Kurtz, a former chat show stalwart turned man-eating piranha woman who has gone native. Accompanying Hunt on her quest is bozo guy Jim, played with gusto and luxurious mullet by Bill Maher, and pneumatic airhead student Bunny, played by Karen Mistel. As they journey into the heart of darkness, Hunt and her colleagues encounter a tribe of emasculated males named the Donahues and a splinter radical feminist tribe who have declared war on the piranhas following a dispute over which sauce best accompanies freshly peeled man. They favour clam dip over the piranhas' dressing of choice, guacamole. After various shake-and-bake shenanigans, Dr. Kurtz refuses to return to civilization, recalling the horror of appearing on the David Letterman show. For anyone who had witnessed the breast-beating infighting of radical 80s gender politics firsthand, Piranha Women's central condiment conceit was pretty funny, unlike all the surf Nazis and rabid grannies of this world whose only jokes were their titles. I laughed pretty consistently at Piranha Women and went on to say so in print in Time Out, after which I thought no more about it. Until, a couple of weeks later, I met a feisty young woman named Kaz, who worked for Colorbox Video in the role of press officer come General Ms. Fix-It. I'd been receiving press releases from her for a few months, and because I like to put names to faces, we had agreed to meet up for a drink in Wardour Street, just across the road from Colorbox's fantastically unglamorous office. Kaz arrived bearing a bag of VHS preview tapes. This was in the days before DVD, remember, when videos were still considered to be handily compact, of forthcoming straight-to-video releases, including the abysmal Oversexed Rugsuckers from Mars, which turned out to be so utterly rotten that even Colorbox didn't much fancy releasing it. We talked about the company's battles with the censors over titles like Intruder, a mild store-bound slasher that had been hacked up by the BBFC, and she promised to slip me an uncut preview tape if she could find one. Then, as we were finishing our drinks, she said in an offhand manner, "The funny thing is, ever since that Piranha Women review came out, I've had people asking what strings I had to pull to get a good review in Time Out. It's hilarious. I told them I had nothing to do with it. Some bloke called Mark Kermode just apparently really liked the film. I told them I'd never even met you." And what did they say? Well, they said good thing too. You don't want to be hanging around with the kind of bloke whose idea of a really good movie is Piranha Women in the Avocado Jungle of Death. Ha ha ha. Over the next few years, I came to know, respect, and really like Kaz, or Cassie as she was better known. She was terrifically energetic, always good-natured, not easy when your job involves dealing with journalists who are generally miserable gits, and most importantly, refreshingly honest. She worked hard at her job, and in all the time I knew her, she never once tried to spin me a line about how great a movie was. She simply alerted me to its existence and imminent release, or non-release in the case of Oversexed Rugsuckers from Mars, and left it at that. She was great. And then she died, quite suddenly, of an undetected condition at a shockingly young age. I always think of Kaz whenever the subject of Piranha Women comes up, which it does with increasing frequency. There's something strangely poignant about the fact that its key players went on to have such stellar careers, and it reassures me to think of Kaz laughing heartily in that pub about the inherent ridiculousness of the movie business. Alongside the prestige of appearing in print, Time Out was soon to open another door for me. One day I was working in the office, filling in for Derek Adams, who was taking a couple of weeks' well-deserved leave. Derek, it turned out, was a drummer, and for a while he and I had toyed with the idea of forming a garage band, bashing out old rockabilly standards and wondering whether the world was ready for a British answer to the Stray Cats, who were themselves an American answer to the Polecats. As I sat there methodically screwing up the listings, I'd improved but not that much, the phone rang, and I answered it. At which point, one of two things happened.